Ladies and gentlemen, let's Gaming Typical video. We're going to be going through the list of components for our $1,000-ish PC gaming rig, or 786 Great British Pounds gaming rig. So I've done this article as well, where everything is clearly laid out, including all of the components, a description of them, their pricing, and their exact model numbers and links to them as well, if you so desire. Which I figure would probably be easier, but I'll do it as a video as well, just for your, well, ease. So, the focus of this rig is for gaming. So the basic premise here is that we're going for a rig that can easily run 1080p, but really we're aiming at 1440p or above, or 1080p with pretty much so much anti-aliasing on it that you will never ever see a jaggy in your life. Pretty much we're going to be able to run everything at 60 frames a second, maximum quality on everything, and so on and so forth. To be honest with you, this budget is actually more than enough to be able to do this. And actually our previous buyer's guide, which was for $750 US, there's a link to that in the article that's linked in this video description, allowed us to basically destroy 1080p, because that one allowed us to fit in a GTX 770 along with a list of other components, of course. This one is even more powerful, and the extra couple of $100 really helps to solidify that and to offer a great amount of performance. So we're going to start things out with the processor, and we've got the i5 4670K. So this is going to cost you $234 or £166. There's not much to say about this. There's probably no reason for most gamers to go for the i7, which would be the 4770K. But the 670K is completely unlocked, allowing us to push it up to about the 4.2, 4.4 GHz range, depending on how lucky or unlucky you are with the silicon gods. Default, however, is 3.4 GHz, it's a quad core, 6 MB of cache, and all the other bits and pieces that you'd expect from a Maxwell processor. It's more than enough for gaming, to be honest with you, and it will easily power our rig for a couple of years to come without too much difficulty. Next up would be the motherboard, ASRock Z97 Pro 3. It's available for $122 US or about £80. Now, back in the day, and we are talking quite a substantial day ago, ASRock were known as like the budget people. They were known as the, I am really broke, I can't afford much, I'm going to go with ASRock. Or they were, for a while, creating these motherboards which had both AGP and PCIe slots. So they always found these niches, but now they're actually really, really solid. And their Pro 3 motherboard, that's the Z97 Pro 3, is a really solid motherboard for the price. It's still budget orientated, but it does feature 6 SATA ports. You've got 6 USB 3 ports, you've got all the other trimmings that you'd expect, good, solid overclocking options as well. It's not going to be maybe the motherboard for, say, those of us who are wanting to overclock with, say, extreme water, but it's more than enough for our needs, and will, once again, serve you for a good time to come. Next up is a CPU cooler. So we're going to be going with the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. It's a bit of an obvious choice, but it's $29.99 US or 27 Great British Pounds. Us Brits get a bit ripped off there, to be honest. But there's not much to say about this one. It's solid, reliable, easy to fit. It's a bit big, which is the only slight downside, but that's to be expected with a heatsink fan combination of this type of caliber. For the price range that you're looking at, you're not going to find anything better. Obviously, you will get much better mileage from, say, water, but then you're going to be looking at least 2 to 3 times the price range, and obviously you've got the inherent issues of that, unless you're going to go with a solid loop anyway, in which case you're still looking at least maybe 2.5 times the price for a good one. This one we actually use in RGT for a couple of our systems, including at one of our main rendering rigs, and it does absolutely fine. Unless you're really, really cranking up the voltage or the clock speeds, this cooler keeps your processor fine and cool. Just obviously be a bit careful when you're installing it. It's not as easy as, say, the stock heatsink fan. It's not to say it's difficult, it's to say just be a little bit careful, take your time, lay all the parts out, and it won't be that difficult at all. Another fairly obvious one, simply because it's just solid and once again reliable, is Corsair Vengeance Blue. This is going to cost you $80 or £62. So it's 8 gigs, which is pretty much the minimum that I'd recommend now. You could go with 16, but it starts to really crank the budget up, and it's probably not worth it for now. And our motherboard does allow us to upgrade as we need to in the future. 8 gigs, as I said, is going to be sufficient, especially because our graphics card, which we'll come to in just a moment, has lots of RAM. There's not really much to say about this one. 8 gigs is basically what we need, and although this RAM is pretty non-frills, it doesn't have like the highest clock speed ever. Vengeance does typically allow you to crank up the clock speed a bit beyond what the manufacturers recommend, and also the timings. So it's definitely one of those parts where it's nothing exciting. It looks kind of cool in the case, however, but it does exactly what you'd expect it on the tin. So we're also going to be going for AMD with our graphics card. We're going to be going with XFX brand, simply because it's one of the cheapest for a pretty nice looking card as well. It's the Radeon R9 290, once again 4 gigs of RAM on this sucker, 391 for US dollars or 299 for us Brits, which is an actual okay exchange rate for once. We're not getting bent over the barrel. Normally I like to give an AMD and Nvidia rating, or sorry, offering for a price bracket, but it's just really hard for me to justify giving you any Nvidia offering that's, or shall I say, competitor with this price range in mind. It's just not really worth it, because the 780 Ti is more expensive. The GTX 780 is more expensive, and the 770 is cheaper but doesn't offer so much performance. This kind of fits in the middle ground range. The R9 290 is just really good. It features 2563 in processors, 4 gigs of GDDR5 RAM. It also supports Mantle, which may or may not be a big thing depending if the games you play support it, but more and more games do support Mantle, which is a good thing. It features one DisplayPort rather, 2 HDMIs, 1 DVI, so not anything astounding in terms of output, but will do you for pretty much everything you'd like. The core clock is 947 MHz, and of course that's just stock. The R9 290s do overclock fairly well, and you can get them, if you're lucky, to get past the 290X speeds, and even stock, if you do the basic maths, it actually puts out almost 5 T-flops of computing power. So that's starting to get to about the 2.5 times what the PS4 or Xbox One could put out, which is pretty damn ludicrous when you think about it. Hard drive wise, we're going to be reusing the same drive as what I mentioned in the $750 budget, but I'm going to give you guys a caveat. I'll tell you that in a moment, but first of all, the W Blue 1TB hard drive, 7200 RPM, of course, $56 or $39.99. Us Brits get once again a good price on that. I'm flying through the components because it is all listed, as I said, in the article, so if you do happen to mishear what I say or whatever, you've got it all listed. There's not much to say about this. If you've got an old drive, let's say your drive is, say, 2-3 years old, and it's large, but it could be fairly slow, then you should probably consider getting this. If, on the other hand, let's say you only upgraded your hard drive, let's say 6 months ago, you'd probably be better to buy an SSD, or just to reuse that drive, save up a bit, then buy the SSD. SSD prices are falling, and so there is that to kind of think of. It really depends what your usage is, how big you think you need your SSD to be. But certainly for this, it's going to be enough, is basically what I'm coming down to. I'd personally recommend, however, if you do have a good hard drive already, or maybe even a storage drive, like you could reuse your old drive, even if it's fairly slow for storage, for like video files and documents and whatever else, which is definitely an option. And obviously as well, you could partition your 1TB. Power supply. I'm going to be once again somewhat reusing an old component for our $750 rig, and this one is going to be the Corsair CX Series 750 watt. The only difference is we're adding extra wattage. Previously, I'd recommended a 600 as kind of a good entry point. 750 now because we're going for not only higher spec components, we're also going to be overclocking a little bit more, as well as we're using a much more demanding graphics card. So this is going to cost you $77 or £60. There's not much to say when it comes to PSUs. I know, like the rest of it, you know, you can talk about the amount of stream processors or how fast the RAM is, but when it comes to PSU, it's like it puts out 750 watts and gives good amps. And then, you know, that's pretty much all you can say. But this is one of those parts, and the reason I stress this in so many of my articles and videos is because I keep seeing people doing it. They buy a really, really high spec, really good part, and then they'll put in a really bad PSU, and then it will go bang. And believe me, there is a story I will quickly regale you with. Several years ago now, I was actually building a friend's PC, and literally speaking, we were actually just about to unplug his old one, and just coincidence, the PSU happens to short out as his old PC is being taken apart. We're literally just about to switch it on for the final time to get out the OS disk and a few other bits and pieces, just so we can basically finish the system. And I don't know if the PSU gave it a screw you before we took it apart or whatever, but it literally exploded, and there were quite literally sparks coming out of the back of this PSU. I don't think any components were taken out. At least I know his hard drive wasn't, and his optical drives were fine. I don't know about the motherboard, but trust me, it was not an experience that I would recommend for you guys. It was not fun. I actually quite lucked it I didn't get an electrical shock. I kid you not here. So the reason I'm stressing this is because if you put together a rig and you put an old or a really crappy PSU in it, it could go bang. So do yourself a favor. Even if you're not using this exact brand, you know, use Antec or something where it's reliable, but definitely get a good PSU, because what you don't want 6 months down the line is to get a PSU that says it's, you know, 700 watt or 800 watt. In reality, it's putting out half the amount of amps on the line, and then you pretty much are sitting there with like an $800 or $1,000 paperweight, because all your components go. A good reliable PSU, if it does happen to go bang, it will, generally speaking, go out and not take the rest of the components with it, which is a good thing. So obviously, I know I'm spending a bit of time on this one, but I'm just really trying to emphasize you don't want to skimp on a PSU. I know it's tempting because it looks like it says it's the same part. You know, it still says it's like a 700 watt PSU, for example, and you know, you might want to save the extra $30, but really don't do it. It's better just to kind of cough up. Next up, optical drive, $22 or £16. This is just an Asus 24 speed. Look guys, only reason I included that is because I got a couple of comments in my last video just saying, hey, you know what, our old drive doesn't work well. And so I just said, you know what, I might as well include one. But to be honest, I literally just went with the cheapest bloody drive possible. There's nothing special here. If you could reuse your old optical drive, do it. There's just absolutely no reason to not. You know, get like a DVD RW, I'd recommend. I am actually a really lazy person when it comes to basically sorting out my own files, like for example, installing via USB. I should really just do it. But I'll just be totally honest, I cannot be bothered to set it up. I can't be bothered to sort out all the drivers. It just, I just can't be bothered. And it's a really shitty, lazy excuse, but I just can't be bothered to go with the whole USB route thing. I keep saying I'll do it every time I format, and then when I basically get to the point where I could do it, I'm just like, I'm sure it's fine, and just move on. So I just constantly use optical, even though it's not really the best way or best approach. But I think for many of us, optical, it's not really required for gaming now. But it's just good to have an optical drive at the end of the day. So finally, we come to the case. It's $50 or $44.99. It's the Antec One. Features a couple of USB 3 slots, great exhaust fan, and well, pretty much all the fans in the world can be fitted here, 128mm of course. This is a part where I personally don't really think a case makes a huge difference in terms of like your aesthetical choice. So by all means, if you see a different one, it happens to be called Bob's case, and you think it looks, really cool, do it. As long as it's, fairly robust and it fits all the components you want in it, and it features all the other bits and gubbins that you require, then by all means go for it. To be honest, I'm not like one of those people where I actually give a crap for the most part of what the case looks like. I used to be, but now mine sits under the desk because I do it for acoustic reasons when I'm recording. But I realise some people do care, they'll put it on display or whatever and they want like the whole windowed thing. Personally, I've done all that and I just can't be bothered with it anymore. But it's, once again, all up to you guys. I'm just giving you an example case. You could by all means go with something a bit different. So, that would about do it for this particular video. That list of components will easily destroy 1080p. It will make short work of 1440p if you happen to be using a monitor. You could probably run some games at 4K, but, that's a bit iffy. Some games could certainly struggle on 4K, like you might be able to do it on like Batman if you're using like FXAA. But certainly 1440p, no issue whatsoever at high frame rates. 1080p, once again, at ludicrous frame rates. Just to give you an idea of the level of performance here, the AMD R9 280, which I reviewed, can easily, might I add, run Batman at 60 frames a second plus, if you're using MSA times 4. So here you've got like a lot more performance, a ridiculous amount of extra performance actually. And you've got a system that can pretty much tear through anything for the next year or so. Anyway, and by the next year or so, I mean a long time. Anyway, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'll see you soon. Take care, and bye for now.